that you might not physically be in Kansas City, but you've got a crazy, awesome exhibit over at the Jones Gallery starting today, actually, as we record
Right.
this, and going until the
Correct.
25th. That's over at 1717 Walnut, in case you guys in Kansas City want to check it out, which happens to be very close to our favorite spot, Taps on Main, which is where our studio is currently being built right now. So that's kind of exciting. So we will definitely be over there checking it out. I really love the fact that you tag conservation causes into your artwork. As we can see behind you, my shirt matches your wall, and that's pretty amazing.
Right.
What were some of
Yes.
the reasons that you got into kind of merging the two?
Yeah, so I've always been an outdoorsy type person. Always fished and hunted and camped and hiked and all of that. And it's just always been a part of what I've done growing up. And I've been lucky to be able to spend a lot of time outdoors. And as my art has grown, throughout the years, and I think having a message is an important component to some art. Not every art has to tell a message, and every piece of artwork doesn't have to make a statement. Just having artwork that's cool and for decoration is fantastic in its own right, and I do some of that as well. But I think education is the key for a lot of areas, and I think people don't realize what's going on. I mean, like the monarch butterfly on your sweatshirt and in a painting, it's now endangered. Per the, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And, who would have ever thought, right? I mean, I bet if you ask 100 people, is this monarch butterfly and endangered, people think of what the platypus and other stuff when they think in that area. And, people just don't realize that. And it's no fault of their own. It is crazy times we're living in, and just surviving is difficult enough. But I think just getting the conversation out there and just starting to talk about it, and I think that's an important first step, is people could say, what can I do? Everyone doesn't have to be an activist, and everybody doesn't have to dedicate, their life to doing it. But if you know about this and you're like, if I just do this one thing this month, that may be right. If I just plant some flowers, or if I just pick up one more piece of trash or something, then, that goes a long way when it's a cumulative effort by, everybody in the city or state or something like that.
Well, and where did you get going and get started? Like, I know that you've talked about how you started when you were like 3 years old, but
Yeah.
somebody kind of had to help you start to figure out like, hey, this isn't just finger painting. This is like really good stuff. Like, how did you grow into that?
Yeah, and I've been really lucky, and when I was growing up, I've always had supportive family that would let me draw and paint, and I had art teachers in school from grade school that they would send my stuff off to like competitions and contests without me even knowing it, and it kind of grew from there. And then when I got older and I went to college, I went to K-State. I know you're a fan of K-State.
Absolutely.
And I was an art major, and I was lucky enough that my parents they said that was fine, and which is really good. And then kind of my career took a little different turn, right? I was a junior. So I dropped out of school, and I hitchhiked to Alaska, and I did a bunch of other stuff, and I worked in a cannery and on a fishing boat. This was pre-reality show days, so I'm quite old. So, but then I came back, and art's always been part of my life, and I've always still drawn. Even though I got a business degree and I got a master's degree, and I went on to get a PhD and stuff. But I always drew, and I always did this, and then I started having family members saying, this stuff is good, right? You should sell it, or, let me buy it, or will you do something for me? And, I'm to the point now where things are stable. I mean, I have 2 kids, as stable as that can be, but, you have, I have,
We get it.
yeah. So I started, entering art fairs and applying to galleries, and it's really started to get some momentum and grow. And it's just something that, even after working during the day, I come home and, I still just love doing it. And I'm glad that people respond positively to it, right? I'm glad that people like it. I don't necessarily do it because I think, well, someone's going to love this and, this is going to sell, quote unquote. I do things that I like, but Yeah, I've had a good response, and I'm getting into galleries, and 2020 was a disastrous year for the art world. So
we had some questions.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, really, it's like finding inspiration in a pandemic when art, I mean, of course, it can be inspired from everything from still life to outdoors and crowded environments. But it's just like, how do you find inspiration in a pandemic when you might be in these confined quarters and kind of stuck, so to say?
Yeah, I mean that is a great question. The pandemic overall has been awful, right? And so I think we can all agree on that. But if you're going to search around and try to find some positives, I think artists have had more time in the studio. I think they've had more time to reflect, and I think that people are producing a greater quantity of stuff. Now the bad side is there's fewer places to show that, and it's more difficult and to get that work out there. But I think it's also a release, at least for me. Like when I'm painting, I tend to not think about the other stuff going on, and I tend to focus on what I'm doing. So at least for a little bit, there's some reprieve on the chaos and the uncertainty of the world. And, then you step back and you're like, okay, I like this. This turned out well. And then, I walk upstairs and, reality sets back in. But I think it's important for people to realize that, artists are small businesses. And, as people support small businesses, I think sometimes artists get overlooked. And if you're out there and you're supporting small businesses and you're looking for a piece of artwork, I can tell you that it's greatly appreciated by a lot of artists out there who, don't have these avenues now because of the restrictions. And, there's not art fairs, and, small galleries are closing, and, there's a smaller window for mid-career and up-and-coming artists to really show their work. Right, artists at the top end, they haven't really suffered because, Sotheby's and Christie's are having auctions, and people are just paying ridiculous amounts of money, right? I think what did that Winston Churchill painting just sold for $11 million 2 days ago at an auction. So yeah,
Super casual.
Angelina Jolie. I'm sorry.
Super casual, just a cool 11 million. Yeah, the art world is still alive and well. It's the levels there.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And some reports are 35% of galleries and things have closed since the pandemic started. Right. And we're talking, small galleries, and, these are all small businesses. Kansas City's done a great job. The Crossroads District and the Art District does a fantastic job. A lot of galleries. And the expectation and the anticipation is that people are going to start showing up, right? The weather is starting to warm up. The vaccine's coming out. So, hopefully it'll be a good year in the art world.
All right. I'm sorry. I have to go back to Alaska. I know you've talked about it a lot since then, but you just talked about randomly picking up and going to Alaska. We know, again, the endangered species and things like that mean a lot to you. Like when you were in Alaska, what did you see that could be used as inspiration for some of your paintings, or some things that you learned that later on in life were more important to you that you didn't know till you went to Alaska?
Yeah. When I was in Alaska, the connection that the people had, I was in Petersburg, Alaska, and the connection that people had to nature and the environment was really strong and really sincere. And it was really a good thing to see. People made decisions based on how that affects the environment and, things of that nature. And that tended to be the first thing that people considered when they did it. And as a result, you have a couple of things, right? You have Alaska, it's relatively remote anyway, but you see in these towns to where, people just still admired the scenery. I'm sure you guys are, driven through Kansas City, you guys have a million fountains and it looks nice. And there are days where you probably, weeks that you probably never noticed it, right? You just kept driving by, you have other stuff. And, the people that lived in Petersburg in Alaska, they always stopped and reflected on that, right? They were always looking at the ocean. They were looking at the mountains and you just saw it thriving. I mean, I literally saw bears walking down the street, and there were bald eagles everywhere. And, so it was just really, really powerful, right? In a sense, not to get too philosophical, but, it
please
made
do.
you.
That's what we asked you.
Yeah.
Give us depth, man. Come on.
It made you really feel important and insignificant in the same way, right? That it made you realize that you're part of a bigger piece, but it also made you realize that you have a direct impact on what goes on in this environment, right? We're all connected together. So, people just, they lived off the land. They grew their own food, and they had such a connection to, fishing and hunting, but they did it in a responsible way for the most part, to where, there had to be rules and there had to be guidelines. And because if those weren't there, then you get to a situation we are now with, like, sharks and other things, to where, they just may not be around because people are just, plundering these resources, and they're just finite. And so, but if you ever get a chance to go, I would recommend anybody to head up to Alaska, because it is unbelievably breathtaking at every turn.
Absolutely. I actually got to spend a couple summers in Juneau area, and there's only 40 miles of road. I didn't realize that. I was like, are you kidding me? So what do you guys do? They're like, we have to fly to Seattle, or we have to take a boat somewhere. Like, that's the only way that we can go. It's like, oh, okay, gotcha. And that's just incredible, because with everything at the drop of a hat here, it's just so easy to get kind of used to the cushy surroundings of things. And so some of your art challenges barriers of all sorts, and kind of causes people to be like, oh, okay, what's that? That's interesting. That's out of our usual realm. What are some of the pieces that are you're most proud of in this current exhibit over at the Jones Gallery?
So at the Jones Gallery, I have two pieces in this group show for March, and one of them is a rhino, the rhinoceros, and it carries on with the almost extinct theme that I have going on. And we have some rhinoceroses that are literally, there's more in captivity than there are in the wild nowadays. And these animals are being killed for their horns. People are grinding it up and they're using it for medicinal purposes, even though there's no medicinal value in there, and for other aphrodisiacs and things like that. So there are just horrific scenes of poachers just cutting off the horns of these animals while they're still alive, and then just leaving them to die. And it's just tragic that that this is occurring, and that we have these these animals that are part of our environments globally, that are just in danger of just never being around. Can you imagine in 100 years, it's just, you see something in a book that you can't go see now, right? Or they just don't exist anymore. And that's one of the pieces I have there. Again, it's just to bring attention to to the kind of the plight and the short-sightedness that some people have. And these are complicated issues, so it's I understand that there's different rules globally and things like that. But anytime an animal is taken off the planet before they should, I think is a cause for alarm, right? It disrupts the balance.
You have one picture or one painting that was extremely interesting when I was looking at it, and it's the one of the Native American, and you have that one, and it has the green paint that is just kind of dripping down through it. Was there any symbolism behind that? What was the meaning behind the painting on that? Because I interpreted it one way, but I just didn't know what your interpretation of it was.
Yeah, so you're talking about the Sitting Bull. So that Sitting Bull piece, that Sitting Bull piece is and that took a long time. So I went through about a couple of dozen sketches before I made that. So that is actually, it's on a wood board, and then there's a 1960s topographical map of the Dakotas on there, and then on that map is I painted the Sitting Bull. And we have a very poor history with the treatment of Native Americans in this country. And, Sitting Bull was from all accounts, right, an honorable, proud member of the Native American community. And we just treated him incredibly poorly. And so with the green, the ink that was painting down, that was kind of portray this kind of a sense of sadness, right, a sense of sorrow. of just how a, entire, a group of people were just, mistreated. Right. And we're just taken advantage of. And, I try to portray that through the depth there of the, between the wood panel and the actual topographical map, and, and then him in black and white, and then the green, almost tears or rain falling down.
Well, and when I interpreted that, but I also looked at the symbolism of the green being like money. And that's kind of why I was asking, because when I saw it, was the first thing I thought of was it in interpreting that. Now, let me swap over. Krusty, let's go from, you want to talk about differences here. Okay.
Right.
Okay, how do you choose to paint Krusty on this? Because that's really far away from Sitting Bull.
It is. And, I think art has a lot of different purposes, right? And on one level, art can just be personal, and it can just be cool, and it could be part of your room and could reflect your personality. And I'm a big fan of Krusty. I think he's one of the most underrated characters on television, right? Here's an entertainer of children who is just tormented by his sins of smoking and drinking and his corporate greed and all of that. Yet he portrays this laughter and happiness. And that's just a piece I think is just cool, right? I think it's just something that you could have in your room, have in your house, and it draws attention. It just kind of makes people smile.
I love it. I kind of want to know what the other underrated characters are out there that you might, I don't know, be inspired by from time to time.
Boy, that's a really good question. Let me see some underrated characters.
Because The Simpsons just had such a wide range of characters on that show, and it's been going on for so long. That's an art form in itself. I mean,
they did.
Just to have that continue. And I mean, I remember watching it growing up, and I'm like, it's still going. Oh, okay, sounds good. So I was just trying to catch up. I'm like, that's some Netflix content for years to come.
It definitely is. I mean, like the principal on the Simpsons, right? His name's B.F. Skinner, and there was a sociologist named Skinner who came up with like the positive and negative reinforcement theory of behavior adjustment. So I'm sure that they pulled that name from him as the principal.
Well, okay, so and you talked about Skinner and Krusty, and you talked about his greed, his sins, and all that sort of stuff. But I'm looking at your work, and a lot of it almost kind of, to me, and that's why I'm asking, it all centers around the mistakes that man is making and the extension of animals with, even the painting that's directly behind you right now about not only the butterfly, but the shark also being extinct. The reason they are going extinct is because of human greed. The Monopoly car, another sign of greed, of wealth, of what that's all about. Is the Jordan shoes kind of along that as well? Because that, to me, based on our conversations, is almost kind of another line of saying, look, this is a symbol of what human greed can make people do, because of the symbolism of what those shoes now mean. Is if you're wearing those shoes, you now have to spend $200 and $300 and $400 sometimes.
I mean, and that's the paradox, right? I mean, we have this culture to where we do keep up with the Joneses, right? And we do have influencers that make us do things, and that's a powerful tool. I mean, people are literally getting murdered over their shoes, and I have this social justice series that I'm just developing now about those types of things. But you have these massive corporations, and I'm as guilty as I buy stuff from I go to Walmart and I buy Nikes and stuff like that. So it's part of our culture, but it is the mechanism behind them, right? And and this uneven global playing field to where Nikes could be made for pennies on the dollar but sold for 200, and you have these massive corporations that just have massive amounts of wealth. I mean, Apple has, as I'm here on my MacBook Pro, but Apple has they have $180 billion in cash that they just don't know what to do with right now, right? I mean, that's not a problem I have, but that's that they have, and you see these things, and then you can get into the what is too big, right? You know, how big is too big? And I don't think there's anything wrong with people wanting to be successful and people wanting to have a good life and, you know, not to have to worry about money and stuff. But then there's a legitimate question of, you know, how much is too much when it makes you make bad decisions, right? And I think that's the key. You know, if you're making these decisions that are disadvantaging one group for the sake of yourself or another, those are decisions we really have to look at. And, you know, with Shaquille O'Neal is, you know, he's done a lot for low-income communities, and you know, he has his line of shoes in Walmart, and one of the goals there was he didn't want to be endorsed by a big company, from what I've read, because he wanted kids to be able to afford cool shoes, right? And they can go and they can buy his shoes for, you know, $25 versus $200. But I mean, there definitely is. I mean, the corporate influence is everywhere, and when you see pop culture references, I mean, it inherently goes back to these symbols that everybody knows. I mean, there's probably very few people on the planet that haven't seen the Nike swoosh, right? You know, and stuff. And, you know, and same with the monopoly. You know, it's, you know, when it makes people make decisions that they would not normally make, I think that's when people just have to step back and reflect upon, you know, what they're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. And I really wanted to pick your brain just a little bit about what you think about the resurgence of art after, you know, historically speaking, after pandemics and after things shut down. And there's kind of like some dark periods of time. Historically speaking, there should be a period of light and rebirth of the art scene. How do we get back on track? How do we start putting art back in communities and start getting back out there with art outside of social media and trying to integrate the art community back together again?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question, and there's no doubt that I think that the art scene is going to really start growing. And, you know, after, just like you said, after bad times, it tends to rebound. And I think a lot of people have been spending a lot of time in their homes, and they've been looking around at the same walls. And, you know, home is a place of you know, a extension of your personality. And I think people are saying, you know, I want to make this more mine, right? You know, I do spend a lot of time here, and I do want to hang things on the wall that do have meaning to me for whatever reason. And I think as the vaccine gets out there, you know, I think art fairs and I think galleries, you know, they need to work with communities and have events that people come out, right? They celebrate artists. You know, I think there should be more murals on walls. Kansas City's done a really good job. You know, they have that mural alley down there, at Locust, and you know, I think things like that. I think they should get people in the community, you know, artists in the community to help kind of decorate the community, right? To make it feel alive, and that promotes it, right? You see these colors and these paintings on buildings, and you see this stuff, and you see there's just about 1 million talented people in Kansas City alone, right? I mean, that, you know, it's just so many talented people out there, and you give them an opportunity to have their stuff seen. And I think that spreads, and I think it starts to become infectious, although I shouldn't use that probably during the pandemic, but you know, you start to get this to where you're like, you know, that is really neat. That is, you know, that has feeling or meaning. And again, it doesn't have to be this deep meaning. It could just be, you know, that's really cool. You know, that makes me smile when I see it, you know. And I think that as that grows, and I think we need to also tell kids, you know, I mean, schools are closing, there's budget cuts, and, you know, I think we need to tell kids that, you know, going into the arts is okay. And it's okay if you don't sell a painting for $12 million. You know, it's okay. It's okay to sell a painting for $200. It's okay to never sell a painting at all if you enjoy what you're doing and, you know, you put your heart into it, and you can step back and say, you know, I made that, right? I mean, there's, you know, the most intimidating time for me is when you're looking at like this blank piece of paper, right? Or this blank canvas. And then when it's done, you know, you say, look, I made that, right? You know, I took my time and I created this. And it's like with all the arts, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. You guys are building something from, you know, there was nothing there, and then the next day you have something, right? And, you know, it's very incremental, and, you know, nobody is just a superstar. And I think we should get away from that kind of mentality that to be successful, you have to be the most famous or the richest and things like that. And I just think, you can make an impact on a small group of people. And I think that's really valuable.
How do we get more kids involved in arts and understanding that everybody has a way of self-expression and using, being able to paint, to draw, to do all that sort of stuff, that it's okay? Because I know how impressionable a little kid can be when it comes to, hey, I'm drawing in class and somebody wants to look over and make fun of it. How do we kind of get away from that mentality?
Yeah. And that's tough. And that is tough. And, I'm older, and I've had numerous jobs and numerous people, and I've been insulted and things like that. And as I get older, it's easier to handle, right, and to realize what's going on. But as a kid, it's incredibly difficult. And I think school districts need to really fight for funding in these programs, and I think they need teachers who are passionate about it as well. To support the kids. And, this is all easier said than done, and I get it. But, our art galleries, I think they should do what they can to have classes, to have, student competitions, to bring the value of it. I mean, podcasts like this talk about, the value of art. And I think if we start to do that and start to realize that people need to make their own path, and it's okay. And, and I'm talking about all the arts, right? I mean, if you want to be a singer, a rapper, or, go into acting or anything like that, that there needs to be more communal support systems, right? And Kansas City has done a good job. They have a very good art scene, right? I mean, there are a lot of towns that don't have that. And, it's more competitive than it is collaborative. And I think if everybody just starts to have the conversation that, look, if I'm successful, we're all kind of successful, right? And if you're successful, then that's also going to make me more successful, right? And as Kansas City is they do have galleries, and they do have these First Fridays, and they do have these things that people can start to say, it's okay to do this, right? It's okay to try to be an artist, to try to get a show in a gallery. And, when I really got back into this and started dedicating myself, I had this list of goals, and, the goals were small, right? It was to have a painting hanging in a gallery. And, and that has been accomplished, and it feels good. I mean, and it feels good, even if it doesn't sell. And I think we need to celebrate that kind of stuff.
I love that. And then that kind of answers why Kansas City is the best place on earth, because of our booming art scene. That's our favorite question to ask people. And I know that since you're not in KC permanently, it can always seem a little bit biased when we ask people. But if you have other reasons that you think Kansas City is the best place on earth, please feel free to share.
I do. And I lived in Kansas City for a while. So I am familiar. So Kansas City, how I describe it to people, is the biggest small town you'll ever go to. So it has this small town feel. People are still nice to each other. The pace is a little slower, and it has all these big city amenities. It has art, it has restaurants, it has music, it has, major sporting events. And it is a different, unique feel to where, like St. Louis, I describe it as like the smallest East Coast city, right? It has that East Coast attitude and mentality. And they're very different. I mean, they're 350 miles apart, but they are a world apart in attitude and atmosphere and stuff. And I think Kansas City, that's very appealing for a lot of people to have that small town feel still, yet you have access to everything you could want.
So, I mean, with it, as we're wrapping up, obviously people can go see your work and probably purchase your artwork at the Crossroads. But if they want to look at some of your other work that may not be out there this week, where can they go?
So they can go to my website, which is just davidruggeri.com, or on Instagram, and that's Dave_Ruggeri, just at Dave_Ruggeri on Instagram. And then, somebody can send me an email. I'm happy to talk to people about it. The Crossroads with the Jones Gallery, they can go there to see those two pieces. But feel free to contact me directly, and I'm happy to do it. And again, you can go to the website and look at the select pieces I have out there, which like you had said, it's a variety of stuff, right? It's a variety of stuff. And I like that. That's kind of what I tried to accomplish.
I think you definitely have done that and more. So
yeah, well, Sitting Bull, man, that's my favorite one. I'm loving Sitting Bull. I do.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I like that one too. I like that one too.
Well, David, we appreciate you hopping on and talking with us about what all you're going to be doing in Kansas City. And, it's not every day that we just get to hang out with a professor that has his PhD and everything else, and we're talking about art. It's kind of awesome. So we appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. It's been great.